The fever had taken hold of Clara Kennedy 3 days before her father made the decision that would change her life forever. And by the time the sun rose on that fourth morning in August of 1876, she could barely open her eyes to see the dusty ceiling of their small homestead outside El Dorado Canyon, Nevada. Her father, Joseph, stood at the foot of her bed, his weathered hands twisting his hat into a mangled circle of felt and sweat. The lines around his eyes had deepened over the past year since her mother died, and now they seemed to carve through his face like dried riverbeds. Clara tried to speak, to tell him she would be fine, but her throat felt like she had swallowed sand, and her words came out as nothing more than a whisper that dissipated into the stifling air. "I am sorry, Clara," he said, his voice breaking on her name. "I have got no choice left. The medicine man in town wants too much money, and we have got nothing left to sell except the land itself. But there is a traveling doctor coming through, heading west toward California. They say he is a real doctor, trained back east. He has medicine that can break fevers like yours." Clara wanted to ask what the cost would be, wanted to understand why her father looked so broken, but the fever pulled her back down into darkness before she could form the words. When she woke again, the light had shifted and her father was gone. In his place stood a man she had never seen before, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that fell just past his collar. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and a black vest that had seen better days. His face was strong and angular, with eyes the color of creek water after a storm, gray-green and piercing. He could not have been more than 26 or 27 years old, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen both the best and worst of what life had to offer. "Miss Kennedy," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a large man. "My name is Dr. Gabriel Orson. Your father has made an arrangement with me to provide you with medical care. I need you to trust me now. Can you do that?" Clara tried to nod, but even that small movement sent the room spinning. She felt his hand, cool and steady, press against her forehead, then move to check the pulse at her wrist. His touch was professional but not cold, and she found herself focusing on that contact, using it to anchor herself against the waves of heat that kept trying to drag her under. "Scarlet fever," he said, though she was not sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. "Advanced, but not beyond help. Your father made the right choice sending for me." Over the next several hours, Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. She was aware of Dr. Orson moving around the room, of cool cloths being placed on her forehead, of bitter liquid being tipped carefully between her lips. Sometimes she heard voices from the other room, her father and the doctor speaking in low tones that she could not quite make out. Once, she thought she heard her father crying, but that might have been a dream. The fever finally broke on the evening of the 5th day. Clara opened her eyes to find the room dim with twilight, and Dr. Orson sitting in a chair beside her bed, his head tilted back against the wall, his eyes closed. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and several days of stubble darkening his jaw. As she watched, his eyes opened and immediately found hers, and she saw relief flash across his features. "Welcome back," he said, sitting forward. "How do you feel?" "Thirsty," Clara managed, her voice rough and unused. He helped her sit up, supporting her with one arm while holding a cup of water to her lips with his other hand. The water was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, and she wanted to gulp it down, but he controlled the flow, making her take small sips. "Not too much at first," he cautioned. "Your stomach needs to remember how to work." When she had drunk enough, he helped her lie back down, and she realized for the first time that she was wearing a clean nightgown that she did not remember putting on. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Dr. Orson seemed to read her thoughts. "Your father tended to you," he said quickly. "I only provided medical care and instruction. Your modesty was preserved, I assure you." Clara nodded, grateful for his sensitivity. Now that the fever had lifted, she could think more clearly, and questions began to crowd her mind. "My father said he made an arrangement with you." "What kind of arrangement?" Dr. Orson's expression became carefully neutral, and he stood up, moving to the small window that looked out over the scrubland surrounding their homestead. "That is a conversation you should have with your father. I will get him for you." He left before she could protest, and a few moments later her father entered the room alone. He looked older than he had just 5 days ago, and when he sat down in the chair Dr. Orson had vacated, he could not meet her eyes. "Papa, what did you do?" Clara asked, though part of her already knew, had known from the moment she saw the look on his face that first morning. "I had no money for medicine," Joseph said slowly. "No money for a doctor. We had already sold everything we could spare, and the land is all that is keeping us from complete destitution." Dr. Orson was passing through town, heading west. "He had the medicine you needed, the knowledge to save you, but he wanted payment." "What kind of payment?" Clara pressed, though her heart was already sinking. Joseph finally looked at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "He is a widower, Clara. His wife died 2 years ago in childbirth, along with their baby. He has been traveling ever since, working as a doctor wherever he goes, but he is tired of being alone. He is a good man, I can see that. He saved your life, and in return I promised him that when you were well enough, you would become his wife." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Clara felt as though she had been struck, the breath leaving her lungs in a rush. "You traded me," she whispered, "like livestock, like property." "I saved your life," her father said, his voice rising with desperate defensiveness. "You were dying, Clara. I had no other choice, doctor. Orson is a good man, educated, with a profession. He will take care of you far better than I ever could. And he agreed to let me keep the land, to help me work it until I am too old to manage. He did not have to do that." Clara turned her face away, staring at the wall. She wanted to rage at her father, to tell him he had no right to make such a decision about her life. But she also understood the impossible position he had been in. She remembered her mother's death, remembered how it had broken something inside her father. She was 19 years old, unmarried in a land where women had few options and fewer rights, and she had been dying. "Does he know?" she asked quietly. "Does Dr. Orson know that you promised him a wife who had no say in the matter?" Her father was silent for a long moment. "He knows the arrangement, but he said he would not force you into anything. He said he would wait until you were willing. And if I am never willing, then I suppose we will face that problem when we come to it," Joseph said heavily. "But Clara, please, give him a chance. Talk to him. He saved your life. That has to count for something." After her father left, Clara lay in the gathering darkness and tried to make sense of her situation. She had been traded like a horse or a bag of seed corn, bartered away to pay a debt her father could not otherwise settle. The injustice of it burned in her chest, hot and bitter. She had spent her whole life in Nevada, had watched the territory grow and change, had seen women fight for small pieces of independence in a world that sought to control them at every turn. And now she found herself trapped by those same old constraints, her life decided by men without her consent. But she was also alive. The fever that had been killing her was gone, driven back by Dr. Orson's medicine and care. She could feel strength slowly returning to her limbs, could breathe without pain. Whatever else he might be, Gabriel Orson had saved her life. The next morning, Clara insisted on getting out of bed despite her father's protests. She was weak and unsteady, but she refused to spend another day lying down while her future was decided around her. She dressed in a simple cotton dress, braided her long, dark hair, and made her way to the kitchen where she found Dr. Orson preparing breakfast. He looked surprised to see her up and about and immediately moved to help her into a chair. "You should still be resting," he said with a slight frown. "Your body needs time to recover fully." "I have rested enough," Clara said firmly. "We need to talk, Dr. Orson." "Gabriel," he corrected gently, cracking eggs into a pan. "If we are to be married, you should call me Gabriel." "If," Clara emphasized. "My father made you a promise, but he had no right to make it without consulting me. I am grateful that you saved my life, truly I am. But I will not be traded like property." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, focusing on the eggs. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and calm. "I understand your anger. You have every right to it. The arrangement I made with your father was born of practicality on both sides. He needed help he could not afford, and I needed something he could offer. But I want to be clear about one thing, Clara. I will not force you into marriage. I will not demand my payment like some debt collector. What I will do is stay here for a time, help your father with the homestead, and give you the opportunity to get to know me. If, after that time, you still do not wish to marry me, I will leave. Your debt will be considered paid simply by the chance." Clara studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but his expression remained open and honest. "Why would you agree to such terms? You could demand that my father honor his promise." "I could," Gabriel agreed, sliding the eggs onto 2 plates. "But what kind of life would that be for either of us? I have already lost one wife. I have no desire to be shackled to another who resents my very existence. I want a partner, Clara, someone who chooses to be with me. If that cannot be you, so be it." He set a plate in front of her, along with some bread and preserves. The smell of food made Clara's stomach growl, reminding her that she had eaten almost nothing for days. She picked up her fork, considering his words. "How long?" she asked. "I am sorry. How long will you stay?" "How long do I have to make this decision?" Gabriel sat down across from her with his own plate. "Until the first snow, let us say. That gives us about 3 months, enough time for you to regain your strength, for us to know each other. If by then you wish me to leave, I will go." It was a more generous offer than Clara had expected, and she found herself nodding slowly. "All right, 3 months, but I make no promises about the outcome." "I would expect nothing less," Gabriel said, and for the first time she saw him smile. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines and making him look younger, almost boyish. Clara felt something flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was just lingering weakness from the fever. Over the following days, Clara focused on regaining her strength while observing Gabriel Orson. He was true to his word about helping around the homestead, working alongside her father to repair the barn roof, mend fences, and tend to the small vegetable garden that was their primary source of food. He worked with the easy competence of a man who had done physical labor before, despite his education and profession. In the evenings, he would read from the medical books he carried in his wagon, sometimes sharing interesting passages with Clara and her father. He spoke of his training in Boston, of the hospitals where he had learned his trade, of the theories and discoveries that were changing medicine. Clara found herself fascinated despite her initial resistance, asking questions that Gabriel always answered patiently and thoroughly. "You have a quick mind," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the desert. "Have you ever thought about learning more, about medicine or science?" Clara laughed bitterly. "Women do not become doctors out here, Gabriel. We are too busy trying to survive." "There are female physicians back east," Gabriel said. Not many, but they exist. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell graduated from medical school almost 30 years ago. Things are changing slowly. Not here, Clara said. Not in places like El Dorado Canyon where we are still fighting just to establish basic civilization. Out here, women are meant to marry, bear children, and support their husbands. That is our purpose, apparently. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft. My wife wanted to be a teacher. Sarah was brilliant with children, had a natural gift for explaining things in ways they could understand. But we married young, and she got pregnant right away, and then there was no time for teaching. She died trying to bring our daughter into the world, and the baby died with her. I have often wondered if things might have been different if we had waited, if I had encouraged her to pursue her dreams before we started a family. Clara looked at him, seeing the grief that still lingered in his eyes. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. But my point is this: if you do decide to marry me, Clara, I will not trap you into a life you do not want. If you wish to learn, I will teach you. If you wish to help me in my medical practice, I will train you. I want a partner, not a possession. Those words stayed with Clara long after they had gone inside for the night. She lay in her bed, listening to the desert wind whistle through the eaves, and allowed herself to consider the possibility that Gabriel Orson might actually mean what he said. As August gave way to September, Clara found herself spending more time with Gabriel. He taught her about the medicines he carried, showing her how to identify different herbs and compounds, explaining what each was used for and why. He let her help him when he was called to town to treat various ailments, standing beside him as he set a broken arm or treated a child's cough. The people of El Dorado Canyon quickly accepted her presence, assuming she was his wife already, and Clara found she did not correct them. She also began to notice other things about Gabriel. The way he was endlessly patient with difficult patients, never showing frustration or annoyance. The way he would sit with dying people, holding their hands and talking to them even when there was nothing more he could do medically. The way he treated everyone the same, whether they were wealthy mine owners or poor prospectors, white settlers or Paiute Indians who sometimes came to him when their own healers could not help. "Why did you become a doctor?" Clara asked him one day as they rode back from town in his wagon. The late afternoon sun painted the desert in shades of gold and amber, and the air had finally begun to cool after the scorching heat of summer. Gabriel was quiet for a moment, guiding the horses with practiced ease. "My mother was sick when I was young," he finally said. "Consumption." We lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, and there was only one doctor. He was old, probably should have retired years before, and he had given up caring about his patients. He would barely examine my mother, just prescribe the same useless tonics over and over. She died when I was 12, and I was so angry. Angry at the doctor for not trying harder, angry at the disease, angry at God for taking her. I decided then that I would become a doctor, but a different kind, one who actually cared whether his patients lived or died. "You succeeded," Clara said softly. "I have watched you with people. You truly do care." "It matters," Gabriel said simply. "Every life matters, rich or poor, young or old. That is what I believe." It was in moments like these that Clara felt her resistance beginning to crumble. She had started this arrangement determined to remain detached, to simply endure the 3 months and then send Gabriel on his way. But he was making that increasingly difficult. He was kind without being condescending, intelligent without being arrogant, strong without being domineering. He treated her as an equal, valued her opinions, encouraged her curiosity, and he was handsome. Clara had tried not to notice that at first, had told herself it did not matter. But as the weeks passed, she found herself increasingly aware of him. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked, the sound of his laugh when her father told a joke at dinner, the concentrated expression on his face when he was reading, the gentle touch of his hands when he checked her pulse or looked at a healing cut on her finger. One evening in late September, a rider came to the homestead with urgent news. There had been an accident at one of the mines outside town. Several men were injured, some critically. Gabriel immediately began gathering his medical supplies while Clara moved without thinking to help him. "You do not have to come," Gabriel said as he loaded his wagon. "It might be bad." "I am coming," Clara said firmly. "You will need help, and I know enough now to be useful." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but Clara, prepare yourself. Mine accidents are never pretty." He was right. By the time they arrived at the mine, 3 men were already dead and 5 others were badly injured. Gabriel worked tirelessly through the night, setting broken bones, stitching wounds, trying to stop internal bleeding in a man who would die before dawn, despite everything Gabriel did. Clara stayed by his side, handing him instruments, holding lanterns so he could see, comforting wives and children who waited to hear if their husbands and fathers would survive. It was nearly noon the next day before they finally returned to the homestead, both of them exhausted and covered in blood and mine dust. Joseph took one look at them and heated water for baths without saying a word. Clara bathed and changed into clean clothes, then emerged to find Gabriel sitting on the porch steps, his head in his hands. She sat down beside him, not speaking, just offering her presence. After a while, he looked up at her. 3 died, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion and grief. "Including the one I worked on all night, Thomas Wheeler. He had a wife and 4 children. I could not save him." "You saved the others," Clara pointed out gently. 5 men are alive who might not have been if you had not been there, I know. But it never gets easier losing patience. Every time feels like a personal failure. Clara reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact with him, and she felt him startle slightly at her touch before his hand tightened around hers. "You are a good man, Gabriel Orson," she said quietly, "the best I have ever known." He turned to look at her, and something shifted in the air between them. His eyes searched her face, and she saw hope kindle in their gray-green depths. "Clara," he began, but she shook her head. "Not yet. Ask me again when the first snow falls. That was our agreement." "Will your answer be different then?" Clara smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in weeks. "Ask me and find out." October brought cooler weather and the first signs that winter was not far off. The leaves on the few cottonwood trees near the creek turned gold and began to fall. The desert air took on a crisp quality, especially in the mornings. Clara found herself paying attention to the sky, watching for signs of the snow that would mark the end of their agreement. She also found herself watching Gabriel more openly now, no longer trying to hide her interest. He noticed, of course, and she would sometimes catch him looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. But he kept his word about not pressing her, maintaining a respectful distance even as the attraction between them grew increasingly obvious. Her father noticed too. One afternoon when Gabriel had gone into town, Joseph sat down with Clara while she was mending clothes. "You care for him," he said. It was not a question. Clara continued her stitching, not looking up. "I do. I am glad. I know you were angry with me and you had every right to be. But I see how he looks at you, Clara, and how you look at him. I think this might turn out to be a good thing after all." "He is leaving soon," Clara said, finally looking at her father. "When the first snow falls, that was our agreement, and I am going with him." Joseph blinked in surprise. "Going with him as his wife?" "Yes, if he still wants me, still wants you." Joseph laughed. That man looks at you like you hung the moon and stars. Of course he still wants you. Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Then yes, I am going to marry him, but Papa, you will be all right here alone. We could stay if you need us. No, Joseph said firmly. You two should travel, should make your own life. I will manage fine here. Maybe sell the place eventually and move into town. I will be all right, daughter. You just be happy. The first snow came in early November, just a light dusting that fell during the night and was mostly melted by noon. But it was enough. Clara woke to see the world covered in a thin white blanket, and her first thought was that today Gabriel would ask her again. She dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She braided her hair and pinned it up, then added her mother's cameo brooch at her throat. When she emerged from her room, she found Gabriel already awake, standing at the window and looking out at the snow. He turned when he heard her, and she saw that he too had dressed with care, wearing clean black trousers and a white shirt with a string tie. His hair was neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaven. He looked nervous, and that vulnerability made her love him even more. Yes, love. She could admit it now. Somewhere over the past 3 months, she had fallen completely in love with Gabriel Orson. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied. He glanced toward the window. "It snowed. I noticed. Our 3 months are up. They are." Gabriel took a deep breath, then crossed the room to stand in front of her. He took both her hands in his, and she could feel a slight tremor in his fingers. "Clara Kennedy, when I made the arrangement with your father, I did so out of practical necessity. I was tired of being alone, and I thought having a wife would ease that loneliness. But over these past months, you have become so much more than a solution to my loneliness. You have become my friend, my partner, my greatest joy. I have fallen in love with you, Clara. Deeply, truly, completely in love. And so I ask you now, without any obligation or debt between us, will you marry me? Not because of what your father promised, but because you want to. Because you love me too if you do." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. She squeezed his hands and smiled up at him. "Yes, Gabriel. Yes, I will marry you. And yes, I love you too. So much it frightens me sometimes." The joy that lit up Gabriel's face was beautiful to see. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Clara wrapped her arms around his neck. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other, feeling the rightness of it. Then Gabriel pulled back slightly and looked down at her. "May I kiss you? Please do," Clara whispered. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, almost tentative, but quickly deepened as 3 months of restrained attraction finally found its release. Clara had been kissed before, quick stolen kisses from boys when she was younger, but nothing like this. Gabriel kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything, and she responded with equal passion, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably talk to your father," he said, his voice husky. "And then we should get married as soon as possible." "Why the rush?" Clara teased, though she agreed completely. "Because I have been in love with you for weeks, and the effort of maintaining proper distance has been killing me," Gabriel admitted with a laugh. "I want you to be my wife in truth, not just in name." Clara blushed but smiled. "Then let us go talk to Papa." Joseph was delighted by the news, as they had known he would be. He insisted on riding into El Dorado Canyon immediately to speak with the minister about arranging a wedding. Gabriel and Clara spent the day preparing, sorting through Gabriel's belongings in his wagon and discussing their plans. "I thought we could travel south for the winter," Gabriel said. "There are mining towns in Arizona that are always in need of doctors. We could work our way west slowly, ending up in California by spring. Would that suit you? It sounds wonderful, Clara said honestly. I have lived in Nevada my whole life. I would love to see more of the country. And you are certain you want to help me with the medical practice. I meant what I said before. I will teach you everything I know. I want to learn, Clara confirmed. I have loved working with you these past months, Gabriel, helping people, making a difference. I want to continue that. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church in El Dorado Canyon. It was a simple ceremony with only a handful of people in attendance, mostly locals who had gotten to know Gabriel over the past months. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, which Joseph had kept carefully preserved. Gabriel wore a new black suit he had purchased from the general store, looking handsome and nervous as he waited for her at the altar. As Clara walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she thought about how much had changed in 3 months. She had gone from being a dying girl who had been traded like property to a woman about to marry a man she loved with all her heart. The injustice of how they had started still stung sometimes, but she chose to focus instead on where they had ended up. The minister, Reverend Matthews, performed the ceremony with appropriate solemnity. When it came time for Gabriel to say his vows, he took Clara's hands and spoke directly to her, ignoring the traditional words. Clara, I promise to love you, honor you, and treat you as my equal partner in all things. I promise to encourage your dreams and support your goals. I promise to be faithful to you in body and heart. I promise to care for you in sickness and health, and to try every day to be worthy of the gift you are giving me by becoming my wife. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks as she responded with her own vows. Gabriel, I promise to love you with all that I am. I promise to stand beside you in whatever life brings us. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your wife. I promise to trust you with my heart, which you have already been guarding so carefully these past months. And I promise that I choose you, freely and without reservation. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, and told Gabriel he could kiss his bride, Gabriel cupped Clara's face gently in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that more than one person in the small congregation wiped away tears. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. The women of the town had prepared food and someone produced a fiddle. There was music and dancing and laughter. Clara danced with her father first, and then with Gabriel, who held her close and whispered in her ear, "How soon can we leave politely?" Clara laughed. "Eager to be alone with your wife, Dr. Orson. More than you can possibly imagine, Mrs. Orson." Hearing him call her that sent a thrill through Clara. She was married. She was Gabriel's wife, and tonight they would truly begin their life together. They left as the sun was setting, waving goodbye to the well-wishers as Gabriel drove the wagon back toward the homestead. But instead of going all the way there, he turned off onto a small side path that led to a secluded spot near the creek. Clara looked at him questioningly. "I thought we might want privacy for our wedding night," Gabriel explained, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "I have been camping here sometimes. It is quiet, peaceful. If you would prefer to go back to the house, though, we can." "No," Clara said quickly. "This is perfect." Gabriel had already set up a tent and brought supplies. While he tended to the horses, Clara explored the campsite. He had made it surprisingly comfortable, with blankets and pillows in the tent, and wood already gathered for a fire. The creek burbled nearby, and the last light of day painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. When Gabriel finished with the horses, he came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," Clara admitted. "Are you?" "Terrified," Gabriel said, making her laugh. "I want a night to be good for you, Clara. I want everything between us to be good." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "I trust you, Gabriel. I love you. That is enough." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Clara felt heat flood through her body. His hands moved to her hair, carefully removing the pins so that her long, dark locks fell free down her back. She worked at the buttons of his shirt, wanting to feel his skin against hers. They moved into the tent, helping each other undress between kisses. Gabriel was patient and careful, taking his time to make sure Clara was comfortable and ready. He touched her with reverence, as though she was something precious and fragile, and Clara responded with growing confidence, discovering the pleasure of learning her husband's body. When they finally came together, it was with a mixture of passion and tenderness that brought tears to Clara's eyes. Gabriel moved with her, watching her face, adjusting his rhythm to her responses. And when they both reached their peak, crying out into the desert night, Clara felt as though they had truly become one person, bound together by more than just legal vows. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the blankets, Gabriel's arms around Clara as she rested her head on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and she traced lazy patterns on his skin with her fingertips. "I love you," Gabriel said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for choosing me, Clara, for giving me another chance at happiness." "Thank you for being patient with me," Clara replied, "for not forcing me, for letting me come to love you in my own time." "You are a good man, Gabriel Orson. The very best." They talked late into the night, making plans for their future, sharing dreams and hopes. Gabriel told her more about his past, about his childhood in Pennsylvania and his years of training in Boston. Clara told him about growing up in Nevada, about her mother's death and how it had changed her father. They spoke of the places they wanted to go, the things they wanted to see, the life they would build together. "I want children eventually," Gabriel said, "but not right away. I want us to have time together first, to travel and work and simply be husband and wife before we become parents. Would that be all right with you?" "More than all right," Clara agreed. "I want to learn from you, Gabriel. I want to become good enough to truly help you in your practice." "That will take time." "We have time," Gabriel said, holding her closer. "We have the rest of our lives." They stayed by the creek for 2 more days, existing in their own private world before returning to reality. When they finally did go back to the homestead, it was to say goodbye to Joseph and prepare for their journey south. Leaving her father was harder than Clara had expected. He had been her only family since her mother died, and despite her anger over the arrangement he had made with Gabriel, she loved him deeply. They stood together on the porch of the homestead, Joseph's weathered hands gripping hers tightly. "You be happy, daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That is all I want for you. I will be Papa, and you take care of yourself. Come visit us when you can. Gabriel and I will write to let you know where we are." "I will, and Clara, I know you were angry with me for what I did, and you had every right. But I hope you know I only did it because I could not bear to lose you too. I could not lose both you and your mother." Clara hugged him tightly. "I know, Papa, and it worked out in the end. I am happy, truly happy." Gabriel shook Joseph's hand, promising to take good care of Clara, and then they were off, the wagon loaded with medical supplies, personal belongings, and provisions for the journey. Clara looked back once to see her father standing alone in front of the small house, waving. Then they turned a bend in the road and he was gone from sight. The journey south was everything Clara had hoped for and more. They traveled slowly, stopping in small towns and mining camps along the way. Wherever they went, Gabriel set up practice and treated anyone who needed help. Clara worked beside him, learning more every day, her natural intelligence and compassion making her an excellent assistant. They reached Arizona in late November and spent December in a town called Prescott, where a bout of influenza had struck and Gabriel's services were desperately needed. Clara worked tirelessly beside him, caring for the sick, preparing medicines, comforting families. She learned to recognize symptoms, to judge when someone was improving or declining, to assist with basic procedures. Christmas found them in a small mining camp called Jerome, perched high in the mountains. They spent the holiday in a rented room above the general store, exchanging small gifts. Gabriel gave Clara a beautiful leather-bound journal in which to record her medical observations and learning. Clara gave Gabriel a new leather medical bag she had commissioned from a local craftsman, with his initials embossed on the flap. "To new beginnings," Gabriel said, raising a glass of wine they had splurged on for the occasion. "To us," Clara responded, clinking her glass against his. "To our life together." As winter deepened, they continued to move from place to place, but always together, always partners. Clara discovered that she loved the traveling life, loved meeting new people and seeing new places. And she loved working alongside Gabriel, loved feeling useful and needed and skilled. By the time spring arrived and they reached California, Clara had assisted with countless cases, and had even handled some simple treatments on her own under Gabriel's watchful supervision. She had set her first broken bone, delivered her first baby, stitched her first wound. She was becoming a healer in her own right, even if she would never have the title of doctor. They settled for a time in a small town called Auburn, in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. It was beautiful country, green and lush compared to the desert Clara had grown up in. Gabriel rented a small house and set up a proper office, and within weeks, they were established members of the community. Life fell into a pleasant rhythm. Gabriel saw patients during the day with Clara assisting. In the evenings, they would have dinner together, take walks, read together by lamplight. They made love often, their physical connection deepening as their emotional bond grew stronger. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing thoughts and dreams and silly observations. One evening in late May, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set, Clara realized she had been married to Gabriel for 6 months. 6 months that had transformed her life completely. She was no longer the scared, dying girl who had been traded for medicine. She was a woman with purpose and skills, a partner in a medical practice, and most importantly, deeply and truly loved. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, noticing her reflective expression. "About how much has changed," Clara said. "About how 6 months ago I was so angry at my father for trading me away, and now I cannot imagine my life without you." Gabriel reached over and took her hand. "I think about that too sometimes. About how we came together because of necessity and debt, but stayed together because of love. I think your father did us both a favor, even if his methods were questionable." "I received a letter from him yesterday," Clara said. "He sounds well. He has been spending time in town, has even been courting Mrs. Henderson, the widow who runs the boarding house." "That is good. He should not be alone." "Neither should we," Clara said, turning to look at Gabriel. "I have been thinking, Gabriel. I know we said we would wait before having children, but maybe we have waited long enough. I would like to start a family, if you are ready." Gabriel's face lit up with joy. He pulled Clara into his lap, holding her close. "I am ready. More than ready. I want to have children with you, Clara. I want to build a life with you that includes everything. Family, work, love, all of it." "Then let us start trying," Clara said, kissing him. "Let us fill our house with children and noise and laughter." That night they made love with new purpose, new hope. And when Clara's monthly courses failed to appear in June, they both knew what it meant. Gabriel examined her with professional detachment that quickly gave way to emotional joy as he confirmed what they both suspected. "You are pregnant," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." Clara felt tears of happiness stream down her face as Gabriel swept her into his arms, spinning her around. They laughed together, crying together, holding each other tight and marveling at this new development. The pregnancy was not always easy. Clara suffered from morning sickness for the first few months, and as she grew larger, she found it increasingly difficult to assist Gabriel with his practice. But he was patient and supportive, taking over the more physically demanding tasks while still letting her do what she could. He read to her from his medical texts about pregnancy and childbirth, explaining what to expect, easing her fears. "I am scared," Clara admitted one night in her 7th month, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Your first wife died in childbirth. What if the same thing happens to me?" Gabriel took her face in his hands, looking into her eyes with fierce intensity. "That will not happen. I promise you, Clara. I will not let it happen. I know more now than I did then. I understand the warning signs, the interventions that can help. And if anything does start to go wrong, I will get help. We are not alone out here. There are other doctors I can call on. You are going to survive this, and our baby is going to be healthy and perfect." His confidence helped calm her fears, though they never entirely went away. But as the months passed and she felt the baby move and kick inside her, Clara became more excited than afraid. She was going to be a mother. She and Gabriel were going to have a child together. In February of 1877, on a cold night with snow falling outside, Clara went into labor. Gabriel stayed calm and professional, guiding her through it even as she could see the fear in his eyes. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours, but finally, just as dawn was breaking, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Gabriel caught his son, cutting the cord with hands that trembled slightly. Then he placed the baby on Clara's chest, and they both stared down at the tiny, perfect creature they had created together. "A son," Gabriel said, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a son. What should we name him?" Clara asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "I thought perhaps Joseph," Gabriel suggested, "after your father, if that would be all right." Clara felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. "That would be perfect." They sent a telegram to Joseph Kennedy in Nevada, telling him about his grandson. His response came back within hours. "Coming to visit as soon as weather permits. Congratulations to you both. Love, Papa." The first few months with baby Joseph were exhausting but joyful. Clara had never been so tired in her life, but she had also never been so happy. Gabriel was a devoted father, taking turns with nighttime feedings, changing diapers, rocking the baby to sleep. He would sit for hours just watching Joseph sleep, wonder and love clear on his face. "I was so afraid," he admitted to Clara one night as they both stood over the cradle watching their son. "Afraid that I would lose you like I lost Sarah, afraid that history would repeat itself. But you were so strong, Clara. You did so well." "We did well," Clara corrected. "We are a team, remember. In everything." As Joseph grew from an infant into a toddler, Gabriel and Clara continued their medical practice. Clara had to step back from some of the more demanding work while she cared for their son, but she still helped where she could, and Gabriel made sure to involve her in medical decisions and discussions. They received regular letters from Clara's father, who had indeed married Mrs. Henderson and seemed happier than he had been in years. He visited twice, doting on his grandson and marveling at the life Clara had built. "You did good, daughter," he told her during his second visit, when Joseph was almost 2. "You built yourself a real good life here." "We did good, Papa," Clara said, hugging him. All of us. Things worked out the way they were meant to. When Joseph was 3 years old, Clara became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because she was not as afraid. In the spring of 1880, she gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, after Gabriel's mother. 2 children kept them busy, but Gabriel and Clara managed their growing family and medical practice with the same teamwork that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. They added a room to their house, hired a woman from town to help with the children occasionally, and continued to serve the community. As the years passed, Auburn grew and prospered, and so did the Orson family. They had one more child, another son they named Thomas, born in 1883. By then, Gabriel had trained another young doctor to help with the practice, giving him more time to spend with his family. On their 10th wedding anniversary in November of 1886, Gabriel and Clara took a rare evening alone together, leaving the children with their helper. They rode out to a spot near a creek that reminded them of the place where they had spent their wedding night. 10 years, Clara said, leaning against Gabriel as they watched the sun set. Sometimes it feels like we just met yesterday. Other times it feels like I have known you my whole life. I cannot imagine my life without you, Gabriel said, his arm around her. You have given me everything, Clara. Love, partnership, family, purpose. I am the luckiest man alive. We are both lucky, Clara said. We started in such an imperfect way, but we created something perfect together. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together as they had done so many times over the years. Then Gabriel shifted, reaching into his pocket. I have something for you, he said, pulling out a small box. I know we already exchanged anniversary gifts, but this is something special. Clara opened the box to find a beautiful gold locket. She opened it and saw 2 tiny photographs inside, one of her and one of Gabriel on their wedding day. On the other side was engraved, "From debt to devotion, from obligation to love. Forever yours, G." Oh, Gabriel, Clara breathed, tears filling her eyes. It is beautiful. Let me put it on you, Gabriel said, taking the locket and fastening it around her neck. I wanted you to have something that symbolized our journey, how we started and where we ended up. Clara touched the locket, feeling the weight of it against her skin, feeling the weight of 10 years of love and partnership and growth. We have come a long way. And we still have a long way to go, Gabriel said, pulling her close. I intend to spend the rest of my life loving you, Clara Orson, until we are old and gray and our grandchildren are running around causing trouble. That sounds perfect, Clara said, turning in his arms to kiss him. Absolutely perfect. They returned home as the stars were coming out, to their house full of children and life and noise. Joseph ran to meet them at the door, now a sturdy 10-year-old who wanted to be a doctor like his father. Emma was right behind him, 6 years old and full of questions about everything. Thomas, at 3, was already asleep in his bed. As Clara tucked the older children in and kissed them good night, she reflected on the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. She had been traded like property, saved from death, given time to fall in love, and had built a beautiful life with a man who treated her as an equal partner in all things. The injustice of how they had started would always be a part of their story, but it no longer defined them. What defined them was the choice Clara had made to stay, the love Gabriel had offered so patiently, the life they had built together one day at a time. Years continued to pass in their pleasant rhythm. The children grew older, each developing their own personalities and interests. Joseph did indeed follow in his father's footsteps, beginning to study medicine when he was old enough. Emma showed an interest in teaching and books. Thomas was still young, but showed signs of inheriting his father's gentle nature and his mother's quick mind. Gabriel's hair began to show silver at the temples, and lines formed around Clara's eyes from years of smiling. They grew older together, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming richer and more complex as they navigated the challenges and joys of a long marriage. In 1890, Joseph Kennedy passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68. Gabriel and Clara traveled back to Nevada for the funeral, bringing their children to see the place where Clara had grown up. Standing in front of the small homestead where her father had made the desperate choice to trade her for medicine, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude. That choice, as wrong as it had been in principle, had led to everything good in her life. "Are you all right?" Gabriel asked, putting his arm around her. "I am," Clara said honestly. "I was just thinking about how Papa saved my life twice. Once by getting you to treat me, and once by forcing me to give you a chance. I wish I could tell him one more time that I understand, that I forgive him, that I am grateful." "He knew," Gabriel assured her. "Every letter we sent, every visit, he could see how happy you were. He knew you forgave him." They stayed in Nevada for a week, settling her father's affairs and visiting old friends. Then they returned to Auburn, to their home and their life. In 1895, Joseph Orson graduated from medical school and opened his own practice in Sacramento. Gabriel and Clara attended his graduation with pride, watching their son receive his diploma and knowing that their legacy would continue through him. Emma married a teacher she met while attending normal school and moved to San Francisco. Thomas, at 15, was still deciding what he wanted to do with his life, but was leaning toward becoming a veterinarian, having always loved animals. Gabriel and Clara found themselves becoming grandparents in 1896, when Joseph and his wife had a daughter. They doted on little Sarah, named after Gabriel's first wife, grateful for another generation to love. On a warm evening in the summer of 1901, 25 years after they had first met, Gabriel and Clara sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. They were both in their late 40s now, their children grown, their grandchildren beginning to arrive. The medical practice was thriving, with 2 younger doctors working alongside Gabriel. Clara still helped when she could, though these days she focused more on teaching the young doctors what she had learned over the years. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "The arrangement you made with my father, starting our relationship that way?" Gabriel was quiet for a moment, considering. "I regret that you did not have a choice initially. That is something I will always regret. But do I regret that it brought us together? Never. Not for one single moment." "I used to be so angry," Clara admitted, "about being traded like property, about having my life decided for me. But now, I think maybe some of the best things in life come from unexpected places. If I had not gotten sick, if my father had not been desperate, if you had not been passing through town at exactly that moment, we never would have met." "Fate," Gabriel said with a smile, "or providence, or just plain luck, whatever it was, I am grateful for it." "So am I," Clara said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Gabriel Orson. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for 25 more. Only 25. Gabriel teased. "I was hoping for at least 50. Clara laughed, the sound full and free and happy. "Then 50 it is. 50 more years of this. Of us." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside the house, they could hear their youngest son moving around, preparing dinner. Tomorrow, Joseph and his family were coming to visit, and Emma had promised to come down from San Francisco with her husband. The house would be full of noise and laughter and life. But for now, it was just Gabriel and Clara, as it had been from the beginning. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had built a love that was strong enough to weather any storm, who had created a life and a family and a legacy that would last long after they were gone. Clara touched the gold locket she still wore every day, feeling the familiar weight of it. From debt to devotion, the inscription read, "From obligation to love." That was their story, and she would not change a single word of it. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Gabriel took Clara's hand, lacing his fingers through hers just as he had done that first time on the porch of the homestead so many years ago. "Thank you," he said softly, "for choosing me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for waiting for me to choose," Clara replied, "for not forcing me, for letting me come to love you in my own time and my own way." They sat in peaceful silence, two souls intertwined, two hearts beating as one. Whatever challenges they had faced, whatever obstacles they had overcome, they had done it together. And they would continue to do so, for as long as they both lived. The journey that had started with a desperate father's bargain and a dying girl's helplessness had become a love story for the ages. Not perfect, but real. Not without its difficulties, but ultimately triumphant. A testament to the power of patience, of respect, of partnership, and above all, of love. As the night deepened and the desert air cooled, Gabriel and Clara finally went inside, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. They had faced it all together for 25 years, and they would face the rest together too. That was their promise to each other, made not just on their wedding day, but every day since. To love, to honor, to stand together against whatever the world threw at them. And they did, for many more years to come. Through the turn of the century, through the changing world around them, through joys and sorrows and everything in between. They grew old together, watching their children have children, watching their legacy spread and grow. When Gabriel finally passed away in 1918 at the age of 68, peacefully in his sleep after a long and fulfilling life, Clara held his hand and whispered that she would see him again soon. She lived for 2 more years, spending that time with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories of their grandfather, of the Wild West they had known, of a love that had conquered all odds. When Clara died in 1920 at the age of 63, her children buried her next to Gabriel, their graves side by side just as they had been in life. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, they engraved the words from the locket she had worn every day. From debt to devotion, from obligation to love. Their children and grandchildren would tell their story for generations. The tale of how a desperate father traded his dying daughter to a traveling doctor, how that doctor had the patience and wisdom to wait for her love rather than demand it, and how they built a life together that became a testament to the power of respect, partnership, and true love. It was a story that began in darkness and desperation, but ended in light and love. A story that proved that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings, as long as two people were willing to be patient, to be kind, to truly see and value each other. Joseph Orson, their eldest son, kept his mother's locket and would sometimes open it to look at the photographs of his parents on their wedding day. They looked so young, so full of hope and uncertainty. He remembered them as they had been in their later years, comfortable with each other in the way only couples who have spent decades together can be. The way they would communicate with just a look, the way they would reach for each other's hands without thinking, the way they would laugh at private jokes that no one else understood. That was what they had built together. Not just a family or a medical practice or a place in the community, but a partnership so deep and complete that they had truly become one unit, supporting each other, challenging each other, loving each other through everything life brought them. Their story became a part of Auburn's history, told and retold over the years. The doctor and his wife, who had come to town in the spring of 1877 and had devoted their lives to healing and helping others, who had raised good children and been active members of the community, who had loved each other so completely that people seeing them together felt inspired to work harder on their own relationships. The house where they had lived remained in the family for generations, each successive occupant aware of the history within its walls. The porch where Gabriel and Clara had spent so many evenings talking and planning and simply being together was carefully maintained, even as the rest of the house was modernized over the years. In the medical college where Joseph Orson taught, he would sometimes tell students about his parents, about how his mother, without any formal training, had become such a skilled medical assistant that she could handle many procedures on her own, about how his father had believed in education and partnership regardless of gender, decades before it was common, about how they had worked together to serve their community and raise a family, proving that marriage at its best was a true partnership of equals. The story of Gabriel and Clara Orson was not just a love story, though it was certainly that. It was also a story about growth and redemption, about overcoming difficult beginnings, about choosing love over resentment, about building something beautiful from unpromising materials. Years after both of them were gone, when the Wild West they had known had faded into history and legend, when the world had changed in ways they could never have imagined, their love story remained. It remained in the memories of their descendants, in the records of the medical practice that continued their work, in the very streets of Auburn that they had walked together for so many years. Theirs was a love that had started with a bargain, grown through patience and respect, and ultimately flourished into something that transcended its imperfect beginnings. It was a reminder that love is not always about perfect circumstances or ideal situations. Sometimes the greatest loves grow from the most unlikely seeds, nurtured by patience, respect, kindness, and the simple willingness to truly see another person. Clara Kennedy had been traded for medicine, yes, but she had also been given time to heal, time to choose, time to fall in love on her own terms. Gabriel Orson had made an arrangement born of loneliness and practicality, but he had also offered patience and respect that allowed that arrangement to transform into something far more meaningful. Together, they had taken a transaction and turned it into a partnership. They had taken obligation and turned it into devotion. They had taken a practical arrangement and turned it into one of the great love stories of their time, and in the end, that was their true legacy. Not just the children they raised or the patients they healed or the years they lived, but the example they set of what love could be when given room to grow, nurtured with respect and kindness, and built on a foundation of true partnership. Their story would be told and retold, adapted and embellished, but at its heart, it would always be the same. A story of two people who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. A love that started with a trade but became a treasure. A love that proved that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, where life was hard and options were limited, beauty and happiness and deep, abiding love were still possible. That was the story of Gabriel and Clara Orson. That was their legacy. And it was, in every way that mattered, a story with a happy ending.